the humanity. I've just been reading a couple different things this morning. Firstly about Senna, and secondly about Max Verstappen, and trying to connect these dots as we like to do on the channel sometimes. Deploying our F1 common sense brain, as is all too uncommon apparently in the weird and wacky world of F1. Let me talk to you about this Senna thing first. And again, it's 30 years after the anniversary of, and Senna was one of my earliest memories, experiences even, of Formula One in earnest. I was a young pup, right? 8 years old or 9 years old or something like that. My mental arithmetic evades me at the time when Senna died. And Senna was absolutely an enigma, although, depending on who you talk to, people have different accounts of him. He wasn't perfect as a man, but that was his perfection. No, that he was charismatic and offensive sometimes in equal measure. And that isn't me doing Ayrton Senna a disservice, because people who were around at the time speak about him in earnest as if he was that. He could be a tyrant. I just read an article by Maurice Hamilton, legend of F1 journalism, and he was talking about his interactions with Senna over the last 8 years of his life, that he'd written an article that claimed that Ayrton didn't want Derek Warwick, the legend that is, to join him at Lotus. The title of the article was, "Is Derek Warwick too fast for Senna?" And obviously Senna didn't like that. His interactions there running with Senna weren't fantastic, let's say. And I don't even want to get into details too much. Maurice had go and read the article on Autosport. Maurice was like, why is Senna being so horrible to me? Why is he interacting with me like that? And then that led me on. You know, you go through these content rabbit holes. I ended up watching James Allen on F1 podcast, god tier F1 journalist. If you were watching ITV and BBC back in the day, you will know who James Allen is. Commentator, broadcaster extraordinaire. He was Ted Kravitz and David Croft all in one. And he's done a podcast where he's talking to the guys, the man who was principally responsible for the Senna film, which, by the way, is absolutely incredible. One of the best sporting docu-films that you will ever watch. Incredible. And it was a privilege to hear this guy, Manish Pandry, talk about the building blocks, how he went about producing this Senna doc. There's a couple bits that stuck out to me, and I had to write notes because he nailed it more eloquently than I ever could and have tried to do in the past. He said that Senna was the last real deal driver. What does he mean by that? Well, back in the day, when Senna was plying his trade, F1 was dangerous, but F1 is still super dangerous. Danger is inherently built into motorsport. When you attend a Grand Prix, you have to sign this bloody waiver. I acknowledge that motorsport is inherently dangerous, because it's not just the participants that have and can die and been seriously injured. It is those in attendance. By last real deal driver, Senna was one of those who embraced that danger. His commitment was tangible to the sport. Tick from Manish Pandry. I think the fact that he understood the essence of Senna allowed him to write and produce this documentary that will go down in sports documentary history. Tangible. This 30 years after Senna's passing, Senna didn't perform. Manish Pandry said there was no performance. That each and every single time, that charisma that oozes, that permeated everything that he does and was tangible when you're watching the Senna doc. He didn't perform, Manish Pandry said. That was simply who he was. Quoting this dude verbatim, because again, he summarises this thing, that the essence of Ayrton Senna better than I ever could. There's something about Senna that makes you feel. You guys hear me talk about F1 each and every single time. In these terms, it needs to be emotive. There needs to be state. This is what we're missing when Max Verstappen is dominating, and we'll get onto that in short order. It doesn't make you, you're not moved by it in the way that it was so easy to be moved in 1994, let's say, when it was Hill and Schumacher. In 2012, when it was Vettel, Webber, Alonso et al. In 2021, of course, when it was Verstappen, plays Hamilton. It's very easy to be moved in these circumstances because the plot lines wrote themselves. It wasn't necessarily about the sport as much as it was about the protagonists. Lewis Hamilton in 2021, man from Stevenage, loves fashion, very different world perspective to Max Verstappen. A Dutchman, brand new, would be his maiden championship. That you don't need to articulate these storylines right. They write themselves. It's more about the people than it is the sport. Henceforth, why the Senna documentary is so brilliant. You don't need to understand about the mechanics of F1 to be moved by the Senna documentary and the enigma that this fellow was. The authenticity of the Brazilian jumped off the screen at you. And here's where the Senna documentary gets techie. Because if you're a Senna fan, really, you understand that his enigma was a function of the Brazilian plight at the time, hyperinflation in the country. These were impoverished people. His people were impoverished, and they were going through a political and socio-economic circumstance that not many of us will be able to give words to. Out of that circumstance, a man in Ayrton Senna was able to rise and triumph in a predominantly Eurocentric sport. F1 is and always will be an old boys game, an English gentleman's club. The Brazilian Ayrton Senna didn't come from modest background. But that doesn't matter in this circumstance, does it? Because he was Brazilian, and in that sense, he was an outsider. He wasn't designed to triumph. Brazilians, okay, Piquet, Emerson, Fittipaldi, but he had to move to Europe to triumph. And the Brazilians, for that, felt super proud. And that, again, you see that manifested at the chap's funeral, eh? His intensity, his commitment, again, when you're watching the documentary, jumps off the screen at you each and every single time. I think this story is incredible, you know, and I think we need to give more credit to the fellas, the guys and girls behind it. Senna in the Williams suit. Go on then. Mr. Matt Bishop, the legend that is, speaks about Senna in the Williams suit and how he doesn't like to look at the pictures because synonymous with Senna in the Williams suit is his ultimate perishing right. Driving that car that was super techy, super twitchy. Tamburello, San Marino, 1994. Manish Pandey references When We Were Kings, and I nearly started crying, you know. Steve A absolutely smashed the light. When he said, Manish Pandey talks about the beauty of the documentary that is Senna. And the beauty of the story that is Senna is that it was about a person, right? More than a sport. He talks about wanting to include the legendary feat that is Donington 1993. One of Senna's best drives, right? From fourth to first in one lap or whatever. Couldn't include it in the documentary because it wasn't a people story. Front and centre of the Senna documentary was a story about a person, a vulnerable person, an ambitious one who had commitment, one who was determined to rise to the top of his field. So why then were we talking about Donington? And herein lies the problem presented to F1 in May of 2024. We don't have the people stories at the moment. The competition obviously helps that circumstance, but if you have the people and the stakes and the uncertainty, then all the rest just falls into place, right? The demographic, the drive to survive generation are glued to their screens, but where is that friction? Where is that combustibility that was Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton in 2021? Where is the Senna and Prost in 89 and 90? No one on the grid is doing it. And that's why people, sadly, will continue to dial out. Manish Pandey talks about When We Were Kings. For those of you who are boxing fans and have watched that documentary, how can you not be moved by that? Again, a very similar documentary and a very similar story is Ali's to Ayrton Senna's, right? Moving, emotive. It's about a charismatic person that jumps off the screen at you. Even if you weren't an F1 fan or a boxing fan, how could you not pay attention to Ayrton Senna and Muhammad Ali, respectively? Where is that? Yet again, for the avoidance of doubt in 2024. Well, Max Verstappen could be that, right? But Max Verstappen has given an interview. Let me set the scene on it. I was reading this. I was like, oh, Max, I don't know if I like this interview from Max Verstappen here. I don't know if I like it. And the reason why I dislike it, Leroy, you're a legend, sir. Thank you so much for joining as a member. The reason why I don't like this story from Max Verstappen is because it will give naysayers fodder. Here's what I mean. The knock on Max Verstappen in 2021 or 2024 even is that people will say, okay, so he's progressed, he's grown, but where's the litmus test for that? Who's applying pressure? They will say that when Lewis applied pressure to Max Verstappen in 2021, he bottled it in the latter stages of that championship. I'm not sure that that's something I can get down with. I don't agree with that. I think Max Verstappen was incredible, barely made any mistakes all of that 2021. But that's what the naysayers will say. He's improved, yeah, but let me see how he gets on in adverse circumstances when he's got a Lewis Hamilton breathing down his neck for a 24-season championship. And Max Verstappen has spoken out about that. And I've got to walk back some things that I've said because it's techie, this, Leroy. This is super, super techie. Here's what I said the other day. I said, when Max Verstappen dropped it on pole at the Miami Grand Prix, I said that Max Verstappen was disgusted, appeared to be disgusted by the lack of competition from the rest of the field. He was surprised at a mistake-ridden lap that he'd managed, that lap was the pole lap. He was shocked that somebody hadn't beaten him. I said then that Max Verstappen was disgusted, bored even, at the lack of competition being presented to him by the rest of the field. And I still believed that until Max Verstappen gave an interview and made an absolute mug of me. Here's what Max said during this interview. I know that competition brings eyes and attention dollars to the sport. But from my perspective, I want to be perfect each and every single time. I want to execute each and every single session, quali, free practice and the race. And my guy Brake, ex-performance engineer of one Max Verstappen, speaks to that. Max Verstappen's gift is that whether it's free practice or quali or the race, jumps into the car and he's 10/10ths straight away right. Many people have said that. Max Verstappen continues, however. What does that look like? Well, what that looks like is domination in the race. I don't want close racing, Max Verstappen said. That's brilliant for the fans. What I want, said Max Verstappen each and every single time, is to dominate these guys to the tune of more than 20 seconds. That's right. Max is saying that he wants to win every single race by at least 20 seconds. Oh, the humanity. That is chaos. Because the naysayers will say, well, Cameron, I told you. I told you already. This chap doesn't like competition, nor does he lean into it. If you're a champion, the naysayers will say, then you want to beat everybody when they're at their best. You want close competition. Otherwise, you will get bored. This is what the naysayers will say. But I will flip that on its head ever so slightly, because the real killers, the real great ones, that's what they want. They want to absolutely destroy the competition. Think Michael Jordan and Ali and Tiger Woods. They don't want it to be close, because close means that the rest are close to them in absolute talent terms. And they don't see it like that. Jordan will always be thinking, if this is close, what have I done? How have I dropped the ball? They will say. Max Verstappen, that's what he's saying. If it's close, then I want to understand why it's close, because I'm so much better than the rest. Oh, the humanity. He doesn't want it to be close. And that makes me fearful here on in. For the rest, Imola Grand Prix is going to be dangerous. I'm telling you, Steve P. Well, yeah, Imola Grand Prix is absolutely going to be dangerous, because an angry Max Verstappen doesn't bode well for the rest at all, does he? He's going to look to come and he's going to try and dominate the field to the tune of 20 seconds over the course of a race distance. And that's scary, isn't it? What I don't think we should do, though, I don't think we should leverage that necessarily against Max in terms of great conversation. If we're couching this conversation in those terms, you can't say that Max Verstappen's not great because he doesn't want competition. I think you want to reverse that, turn that 180. I think you can say that ultimately Max Verstappen will go down in the pantheon of greatness, be on the Mount Rushmore of F1 drivers because of that. Because at each and every single juncture, he's looking to dominate. A second per Juan Manuel Fangio's thesis that he wanted to win with the least resources possible. That the perfect victory was not 20 seconds, that it was half a second, that it was mechanical empathy, that you wanted to be efficient in your endeavour. Max Verstappen's thesis is the stark opposite to that. Diametrically opposed to Juan Manuel Fangio. He's looking to go scorched earth each and every single time. And I think, sadly for the other 19 on the grid, chat, that doesn't bode well. I think that's the making, the DNA and the fabric of Max Verstappen. Doesn't bode well for the rest then, eh? But I digress.